The Ricoh GR1 was a street photography camera legend that came out in the late 1990s with a beautifully sharp 28mm f2.8 lens, which still commands very high prices on eBay at the moment. But what followed in the past few years were the digital versions, of which I have the second iteration, and I'm going to share some of my experiences of this camera with you today. Now, this is not by any means going to be a comprehensive look at all of the functions of this camera. You can get that from other YouTube videos. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the camera, what I like about it. You can see it uses fairly small batteries. Now, the battery life is not bad, but they're so small that I can carry an extra one with me in my pocket. That's not a big deal to me at all. Switch on the camera there, you see nice ring of green light around the on-off switch, but it is so customizable that you can even switch off that light around the on and off switch if you want. The screen is nice and clear, big enough, and in fact the LCD becomes your viewfinder. There's no built-in viewfinder. It doesn't have a flip screen. Doesn't particularly bother me so much the way I use this camera. But it's all designed for one-handed use. You can see here the exposure compensation, plus or minus, up and down, very easy to function. Use one hand. You can keep a shopping bag in your other hand as you're wandering around, and just use one hand to switch all the dials. You can see autofocus and continuous autofocus there, adjusting shutter and aperture manually. Now, one beautiful thing about this camera is the ability to set a snap focus. So you dial in the distance, and anything from that distance on, as you see on the screen there, will become in focus. So when you're pressing the shutter button halfway and focusing, that may not be fast enough. The snap focus allows you to push down the shutter button at that preset distance, and immediately the camera will be in focus when you take your shot, which is amazing for a street photography camera. It's really what you're looking for. I tend to keep mine at about 2.5 or 5. I don't particularly do straight in your face camera shots. Now, on the side here you see the effects button, and there's a switch for the flash. The new version doesn't have flash, and that really puts me off. So this is one reason why I'd want to stick to this second iteration of the camera. It's great for fill-in flash, and I really don't want to be lugging a flash around with me, even if I don't use it that often. So I found that very useful for travel and for a bit of fill-in flash when needed. So looking at the top of the camera, there is the mode selector dial here. In order to work that, you have to press the little button above it that allows you to rotate the dial. And there are several different settings, some fully manual. There's a video setting, although nice to have. I don't use this very much for video. This is primarily a photography camera. And shutter and aperture priority. But the most useful one is this TV setting, and this allows me to set the shutter speed and aperture that I want, which is usually a shutter speed of around 1/250th or 1/500th of a second, and on the other dial there I can set the aperture, so usually around f8. Now if I do that and combine it with snap focus, keeping the ISO to auto high, this becomes a very rapid machine to take stealthy street photography. It's a street ninja, and this is its beauty. This is where this camera really excels. But interestingly, close-up or macro photography also is very pleasing on this camera, and here are a few examples of how I've used it, and got some really nice results, I think. So coming back to that effects button on the left side of the camera, this is absolutely brilliant. It's a real treat to have. There are so many different effects, for example, different black and white effects, positive film, retro. My favorite being retro, the positive film, and the high definition. The high definition ones actually look like paintings on a canvas. And although not usually my sort of thing in photography, on this particular camera, I've really grown to love it in some circumstances. It gives you I wouldn't say abstract, but it gives you a very different approach to photography when you need that extra bit of inspiration. The colours are superb. I think you can see from some of these examples, straight out of the camera, that's what you get. I don't do any fiddling with the pictures when I've finished. In fact, I don't have any post-editing software other than that provided by on my own computer. Now, one great benefit of this 28mm APS-C camera is that it lends itself very well to landscape work. You can fit in an awful lot through this lens, and I would much rather carry this whole camera around with me than a separate wide-angle lens, for example, for a digital SLR kit. Even environmental portraits work well. It's not really a portrait camera, but look at the detail on this street vendor's face. Would you really need any more megapixels or detail that, for example, the next version of the Ricoh GR adds? I'd argue not. Now, for some of us, it does take a bit of getting used to not having a viewfinder, but you can buy other viewfinders, not necessarily the Ricoh one, to fit onto your camera, which I would recommend if you really want to use one. This one's quite inexpensive, less than £15, and it just clips on the hot shoe there. But the way this camera is supposed to be used really is by focusing on the screen. It's a large screen and it's a wide angle lens, and all you need to do is crop the shot a little bit once you're finished. But it's nice to have a viewfinder like this if you want to use it up to your eye occasionally. So the other thing I've found is that with the 2.8 lens and good sensitivity at high ISO, this camera is great for low light and night photography, as you can see from some of these pictures here. So you'll still be able to take lovely shots at night. Of course, not the fastest of cameras, but it's fast enough to be able to achieve that. So I have to say that when I first got this camera, I did have some mixed feelings about it, probably because I was used to using other cameras and the Fuji system and having viewfinders, etc. But now I don't think I'd be without it. This camera is definitely not for everyone, in the same way that you wouldn't use a chainsaw to slice your bread. But that doesn't mean to say it's a useless tool. It's a highly specialized tool that when used in the right way, it will tick several, but not all boxes. But I can tell you that when it delivers in spades. Doesn't make my other cameras redundant, but those other cameras have their own limitations in any case. Now, if you couple all that with the size of this camera, which is the size of my palm, and how inconspicuous it is, its attraction definitely escalates. Would I prefer this one over the GR3 with its optical image stabilization? Well, I suppose possibly, but with the fast shutter speeds that I use in the snap focus, that usually overcomes that issue. The higher megapixels is, in my opinion, unnecessary unless you're really cropping your pictures significantly and frequently. So what's my advice? Well, I certainly wouldn't hesitate in considering this camera. If, like me, you enjoy street photography, you like to travel light, and you want to be inconspicuous and stealthy with a powerful tool that I think you'll find very liberating. You will definitely capture that moment and many more with it. If I can share a little secret with you, that's go for this version and save yourself some money. I really don't think that you need anything more than this to make beautiful photography, not just on the streets, but in other settings as well, as I've shown you. Hope you've enjoyed it.